I rarely get surprised by what politicians get up to inside their parties, but it was quite the shock to hear of the unexpected axing of ATM President Vuyo Zungola. The Chewing Minister of Higher Education has missed her deadline to explain to Parliament who exactly sits on that independent panel which advises on appointments at SETAs. The NPA has recorded a much-needed win in one of the Gupta-linked cases after the Supreme Court of Appeal ordered a retrial of the former accused in the Nulani investments case. Here in the city of Gold, the tussle over mayoral candidates is shaping up to be a divisive battle in the DA, as Helen Zille says she's got unfinished business in Johannesburg. President Cyril Ramaphosa has launched the national dialogue and shared his thoughts on the so-called infiltration of the NPA. I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo, and this is your Week in Politics. DA Federal Council Chairperson Helen Zille says she's been approached to stand as Joburg mayor. This has been met with cautious optimism from some quarters, while others are calling for new blood to fix the crumbling municipality. Critics say it's an insult to young leaders who've already been in positions in the metro. But Zille says she's leaving it to the selection committee to make the final decision.
If it's an open system, why would you be secretive about who approached you? Because as things stand, you and I know very well what you are doing right now, and that is essentially you are campaigning for this position, but through backhanded ways, if you like. And this is a campaign.
How do you mean? How do you mean?
Taking TV interviews for something that is yet to be pronounced. That is
Well, you asked me
a campaign.
for an interview.
That's sure. That's fine. That's fine. This is why you are here to answer, therefore, why it is that you would put your hand up. Some would say this is actually a done deal. You're simply testing the waters right now.
It definitely isn't a done deal. I'm not testing the waters at all. I didn't want it to come out. I actually don't know who leaked it to the media. Maybe if you tell me who leaked it to the media, I can tell the media who proposed that I should stand for this position. I mean, the media never, ever reveals its sources. So, you know, there are some things that one doesn't have to discuss in public, and there's nothing secretive about it.
At the same time, the DA's Joburg caucus leader has also thrown her hat in the ring.
Every member of the party is allowed to apply to be mayor of the city of Johannesburg. Helen is considering applying, and so have I. So
she's clear that she's been approached.
That's fine. Everybody can be approached and everybody can apply. The party has processes, and I'm sure that processes will apply to everybody, including Helen.
And so your hat is also in the ring?
Yes, my hat is also in the ring.
You would love to be a mayor of Johannesburg one day?
Well, there's a lot of work that needs to get done in Johannesburg. It's a mess. I'm sure if we need a bomb squad, we are in more trouble than we actually thought to start with. There's going to be a lot of work. It's not going to be easy to turn Johannesburg around. And I'm not one to run away from a challenge, and that's one of the reasons why I put my hat in the ring as well.
The biggest criticism of Zille's possible candidacy is that at least 2 black mayors who've run the metro were allegedly hamstrung at times by the DA's national leadership. Herman Mashaba's tenure between 2016 and 2019 has been used as an example of how Zille failed to understand the dynamics of the council, which sometimes meant working with parties like the EFF. The other critique is about the plight of black people in townships in Cape Town, where Zille previously served as mayor.
We live in a democratic dispensation that millions of our people paid dearly for until 1994. Helen, like any other South African, has got the right to contest anywhere where there's a position. So I think Action SA that has got absolutely no dispute on that matter. She always believes that she wants outright majority. She always tells the voters to say if they want the DA the government, they must give DA the support. Currently, as we stand, DA in the city of Johannesburg has only got 70 councillors, down from 104 when I was the mayor. So I'm not really sure how DA under Helen Zille can believe that they can move from 70 votes to 136, because for them to govern without a coalition, she will need 136 voters. And the dynamics totally different here in the city of Johannesburg.
And while the DA fights it out over who they will put forward for the 2026 local government elections, the ANC in Johannesburg is yet to hold its elective conference. And this will provide some clues about a prospective mayor. But meanwhile, the Tuli House is going to be conducting interviews for leaders applying to run in metros with a much stricter set of rules, such as not having a criminal record, among other requirements. On the legal front, the Supreme Court of Appeal on Thursday ruled in favor of the National Prosecuting Authority, which has been seeking a retrial in the Newzroom Investments fraud matter related to the failed Vrede Dairy Farm project. This was the very first state capture case launched in 2013, where prosecutors went after the Gupta Family's associates and former Free State government officials who were granted a 24.9 million rand contract to do a feasibility study. But the group was acquitted after a scathing judgment by the Bloemfontein High Court 2 years ago.
This is a confidence booster for our prosecutors whose morale had been dampened by this. Secondly, it is a vindication of our firm view all along that the Honorable Acting Judge Gosha had misdirected herself on a number of issues relating to the principles applying in Section 204, the principles applicable in considering application in terms of Section 174 of the Criminal Procedure Act, where she said, accused person don't have to answer to this.
When the acquittal judgment was handed down, there were questions about how a case this big could have been given to an acting judge who the SCA found made numerous errors of law. Judges Matter has weighed in on the issue.
It is unusual for a big and complex case like this to be allocated to an acting judge, not only because of the experience that is usually required when you deal with such cases, but also just from a time perspective. Usually permanent judges have a little bit more time to deal with the case from start to finish, because some cases, especially a case involving so many accused persons, so many witnesses, and the complexity of the evidence that needs to be dealt with, you need a permanent judge who has the time to deal with all of those complexities, because acting judges are only appointed for a short period, and then if they go back to practice, that means the case cannot proceed. And so for us, it was unusual, and we did think it's not a normal thing for such a big and high-profile case to be allocated to an acting judge, and it's something that we also questioned. But again, it didn't mean that we believe that there was any incompetence or any reason to doubt the acting judge's abilities.
The Newzroom Investments victory comes in a week when President Cyril Ramaphosa says he doesn't believe there's state capture underway at the National Prosecuting Authority. It comes after NPA head Shamila Batowi claimed her office has been infiltrated by those who don't have the rule of law at heart.
The NDPP did make that statement, and she has later said she used the wrong word about the infiltration. And I'm going to have a meeting with her so that she can really sort of download and take out of her chest some of the challenges. She is facing a number of challenges, but the NPA has really done considerable work to stabilize itself, as well as to go on with various prosecutions. Now, quite often, we look at those where there's failure or where there are mistakes, and we think that the whole system is not working. And she will be able to speak to that herself, and as she does when she talks to me. So I don't believe that there is state capture now that is underway in the NPA.
While the NPA scored at least one victory this week, it's still not winning when it comes to its star witness in the Asbestos case, Moroadi Cholota. Cholota, who's the former PA to ex-Free State Premier Ace Magashule, won her case against the state to have her extradition from the US declared unlawful. On Friday, the NPA applied for leave to appeal the matter, but their request was dismissed.
The state knew 2 months before the extradition took place that there was no valid and lawful request for extradition. and it appears from this court judge, as it appears from the court's judgment in this matter, the state did nothing about it and chose to stand by the request made by the DPP.
Here's Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo from the Bloemfontein High Court with that report.
The involvement of Mr. Cholota on these particular matters just started after she had appeared before the Zondo Commission, where she was invited to testify before the then Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. And following that, there was a letter that was sent to her as she was still in the USA pursuing her studies. And of course, the first approach the state used in terms of trying to interact with her, they had approached her citing that she might be one of the state witnesses. And of course, after the first interaction with the NPA, and of course, Ms. Cholota then, according to reports, failed or refused to implicate individuals on facts she was not aware of. That's when then the attitude of the NPA towards her changed, and then now she was approached as a suspect. That's how she was linked to the Asbestos matter. And of course, what we understand to have been the core of the argument or her involvement was that the core of the involvement of her in this particular case, it was in her capacity as a personal assistant to the then former premier of this particular province, as she was a personal assistant. So the NPA or the state at the time wanted to understand what exactly was happening through the bursary schemes, and of course the involvement and the transactions that were happening from the office of the premier on the matters we are dealing with today. And that's when it all started for her. However, then there were several attempts which were made by the state to try to bring her back to South Africa. I understand 6 times they tried, and obviously in the very last time, that's when they added new information which then described Ms. Cholota as someone who was a fugitive, but also someone who has links, in Kenya. That's when the USA authorities decided to really grant that extradition. That's when she came to South Africa, and of course she was here to face, to start with the trial proceedings. However, when they were supposed to start those trial proceedings, that's when she raised the issue of how she was brought back to South Africa, citing that, the manner in which she was brought back to South Africa was unlawful.
But we are not surprised with the outcome. We have long been aware that the manner in which our client was extradited was unlawful. It's a settled law that the power to request an extradition or for someone to be extradited lies with the executive. So we believe that now the time is ripe for the NPA to take accountability. To an extent that they cannot do that, they need to leave our client alone.
The Chewing Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Ziyanda Ngcobo, has missed Wednesday's deadline by Parliament's Portfolio Committee to submit the names of panelists that apparently advised her on who to place in SETAs. Now, the integrity of the process came into question when a leaked list of names for new board members revealed that Minerals Minister Gupta Family's son was one of those selected. Ngcobo refused to take the legislature into her confidence during a sitting.
What makes him credible, in your own view? Minister?
What makes a person credible, Chair, is exactly how it is defined when you Google. By encyclopedia, you'll see what it means. It's exactly that.
You are not going to answer us.
The minister claims she needs more time to follow the right processes, that there's paperwork, she has to get permission from the people before she names them. Do you believe her?
I do not believe her. There's no such thing. One, if those people exist, then she automatically knows naturally who they are because she would have appointed them. So all she needs to do is to pen a paper down, and she can even do it via WhatsApp, and tell the committee chairperson, who will forward the message to the committee of who those people are. So her refusal to give us the names of those people gives us 2 impressions. That one, either they do not exist at all, and that the final appointments for the board, for the SETA board chairpersons came straight from Luthuli House and Dr. Gupta Family, the ANC national chairperson, or 2, the same principle that the composition of the panel exists, compromises or constitutes or a cadre deployment committee that has ANC-aligned people who were given a clear brief of who they're supposed to appoint there.
Nkabane's response to questions and her overall behavior sparked a request from her boss, President Cyril Ramaphosa, to ask for a report on her appearance before Parliament's Portfolio Committee.
No, I've not yet received a report from the Minister of Higher Education. She is meant to give me a report. She's received a clear letter from me, so that is still underway. And when it happens, we will be able to communicate that and what it is that we need to do going forward.
The ATM party has sacked its president, Ziyanda, who's been leading the organization since its inception in 2018. The 12 Apostles church head will now take over, while Zungula will remain the party's parliamentary leader. The ATM says the decision to split roles is aimed at strengthening the organization's ability to serve its base.
There's been 7 years under the leadership of Ziyanda of making sure that no one is above the law, equality under the law. It was important that even the president of this country, when we found millions under mattresses and couches, that it was the ATM that led with the Section 89 impeachment process. It was the ATM that led with the Section 96 a mere evaluation through the public protector and other spheres. Under President Zungula, we have seen a very rare phenomenon.
When we come back, South Africans react to the launch of a national dialogue which not all are convinced will bring meaningful change. And the families of SANDF soldiers deployed to the front lines of the Eastern DRC conflict will finally be reunited with their loved ones. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned to Your Week in Politics here on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. The first batch of South African National Defence Force soldiers landed back into the country on Friday, marking the end of their semi-DRC deployment to the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
The troops that formed part of the first batch of the SANDF personnel to return home from that conflict-stricken DRC have now arrived. They've been fighting alongside a delegation of soldiers from Tanzania as well as Malawi in the country since 2023. Now, as I said earlier, these soldiers were meant to touch base in South Africa at midday today in Bloemfontein, but as the minister had updated us earlier, it was due to technical problems with the contracted airline that this delay has now taken place. What was meant to be a day of celebration, welcoming our heroes home from that war, has now turned into frustration due to those flight logistical issues.
President Cyril Ramaphosa is off to Kananaskis for the G7 summit, where he's hoping to place our G20 presidency on the agenda. On Wednesday, Ramaphosa spoke to Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney about strengthening political and bilateral trade relations between the two countries. The pair also agreed to align on the G20 and G7 topics for this year. Here's Ramaphosa on Tuesday when asked on the sidelines of a site visit about what he aims to achieve from this trip.
So the G7 gives us an opportunity to go and propagate our message, the message about the presidency of South Africa of the G20 and how we want to see great outcomes out of the G20. And we're going to use it as a platform to begin to consolidate what we want to achieve in November when the Leaders Summit takes place here. So it's a great opportunity, and we're hoping that there will be good outcomes out of it.
Staying with President Ramaphosa, our first citizen officially announced a national convention on the 15th of August, which will precede a national dialogue to take place early next year. Over 30 eminent persons have also been chosen to oversee the process of ensuring that there's a coordinated message spread across South Africa to enthuse citizen participation.
There are questions of legitimacy, there are questions of representation that still arise. However, it seems like the state-led intervention is still to appoint a steering committee that will drive the process. There could be questions around the location at the NEDLAC, because then representation once again becomes an issue when NEDLAC is concerned, because, for example, you won't find the informal sector there, the unemployed youth are not sufficiently represented there. Civil society is not represented sufficiently at NEDLAC also. So those are the questions that arise.
After the National Convention, the actual dialogue will take place early next year. But how exactly will this phased process be undertaken over the coming months?
The broad array of people that you see there are intended to help us lend the message of the national dialogue across sections of our society, such as we envisaged from the beginning, that it will be an inclusive process. And so those names are a reflection of that. Now, what we look forward to doing over the next short while is, over the next week, consolidating the work of the committees, and then very soon, hopefully in another week or so, we are able to sit down with a thorough briefing to onboard those eminent persons so that they begin to take the message of the national dialogue to the various constituencies.
On Friday, the National Dialogue Preparatory Task Team, which comprises of foundations, presidential representatives and NEDLAC, held a briefing to outline how they will ensure that the process takes a bottom-up approach. Newzroom Afrika's Ntokozo Khumalo has the details.
It's the first step towards a national conversation about the country's most pressing challenges, and it kicks off on the 15th of August. The Presidency, National Foundations and NEDLAC are behind the preparatory task team for the National Dialogue, an initiative announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier this month. A permanent steering committee will be announced once the convention takes place in August.
The preparatory task team, which consists of a group of individuals working on a voluntary basis, will then be replaced by a representative permanent steering committee to take the process forward.
The special advisor to the presidency, Stain Speed, says the convention will set the tone for the dialogue and structure the conversations that should take priority.
The idea is that the first national convention that will be held on the 15th of August will be an agenda-setting convention where we bring together a broad diversity of South Africans to say what are the areas that we want to cover in the national dialogue. And that from there, the national dialogue takes place through a whole range of public interactions. That's where South Africans are going to be talking to each other in their localities, in various institutions on various themes. And I think that that would then be brought together in a second national convention. And collectively, that process would be the national dialogue.
While final costings are being worked out, the projected budget has raised eyebrows. The initiative could cost up to 700 million rand, which the task team says amounts to roughly 11 rand per citizen.
A draft budget from the preparatory task team. What we could say firstly is that democracy is not cheap. Building a nation is very costly. And that's why the next thing we're going to do, emerging from this work, we're going to go to the Inter-Ministerial Committee where we present the draft budget. Then we workshop that budget. And just to give you a sense, I mean, just to pull the provinces, the municipalities, you're looking probably estimation of more than 700 million. So that's quite a lot of money.
The task team insists there are checks and balances in place to ensure funds go to where they're supposed to.
We're going to have a monitoring and evaluation framework. And that itself has got to be citizen-led, because citizens must report to say that in my community, this is happening, that we agreed is going to happen, but this is not happening in my community.
And it's the very youth that the task team says must take part for the process to succeed.
Without youthful participation, we can pretty much forget the success of this dialogue, and ultimately the success of our country.
The preparatory team says the convention on August 15th must answer one question: the desired actionable outcome of the process to ensure that the national dialogue is not just about putting forward complaints, but also workable solutions.
This is my lot for the week, but more political stories on Newzroom Afrika in the coming days. President Cyril Ramaphosa is traveling to Canada on Saturday for the G7 summit, where he plans to put our G20 presidency on the agenda. And in another important development, next week also marks 30 years since the doors of the Constitutional Court were opened by our country's founding father, Nelson Mandela. But for now, it's goodbye. Thank you for watching.